What if some of the most gripping war stories you could watch right now weren't hidden behind subscriptions or big studio hype, but sitting quietly on YouTube, ignored and underestimated? These are the films that look modest, feel forgotten, and then completely catch you off guard. Halfway through, you realize something is different. The tension is sharper, the people feel real, and the emotion hits harder than expected. Stay with me, because these aren't just free movies. They're quiet surprises that know exactly when to strike. Number 12, 7 Days in May, 1964. This movie doesn't imagine chaos. It imagines order going too far. 7 Days in May opens with confidence. Institutions are strong. Leaders appear calm. Everything looks stable. And that's exactly the problem. The story follows a military officer who begins to notice tiny cracks in a system built on absolute certainty. Procedures are followed perfectly. Loyalty is unquestioned, and dissent feels dangerous. What makes this film unsettling is its restraint. No panic, no shouting, just polite conversations that slowly reveal how fragile democracy can be when power stops accepting limits. The threat isn't loud, it's disciplined, structured, professional. Released during a tense moment in history, the film predicted a future where authority could justify anything as necessary. It warned that when decision-making becomes isolated, accountability disappears. Today, the idea feels disturbingly familiar. Systems that claim to protect stability often resist transparency. Oversight becomes inconvenient. And questioning intentions can feel like betrayal. 7 Days in May doesn't accuse, it observes. And that makes it more effective. By the end, you realize the danger wasn't hidden. It was proudly organized. This is a reminder that the most serious risks don't come from disorder. They come from systems that believe they are flawless. Number 11, The Big Lift, 1950. This is a war film where the battle is exhaustion, patience, and responsibility. The Big Lift doesn't focus on combat. Instead, it drops you into a city still broken from conflict. Shot in the real ruins of Berlin shortly after the war, every damaged building and empty street carries weight. You're not watching a recreated setting. You're watching history that hasn't had time to heal yet. The story follows air crews involved in the Berlin airlift, flying non-stop missions to supply a city cut off from the world. The danger isn't flashy, it's relentless. Long hours, mechanical stress, mental fatigue, and the pressure of knowing that failure means people suffer below. What makes the film powerful is its quiet honesty. There's no dramatic swelling music telling you how to feel. Instead, the camera lingers on tired faces and repetitive routines. The strain builds slowly. You start to understand how heroic acts can feel mundane when they happen every single day. Montgomery Clift delivers a performance that feels internal and restrained. His character isn't chasing glory. He's wrestling with responsibility and emotional distance in a place still haunted by recent trauma. The interactions between former enemies feel tense but restrained, reflecting a world learning how to coexist again. The Big Lift is about rebuilding instead of destroying, and that focus makes it stand out. It reminds you that some of the most meaningful wartime efforts happen after the headlines fade, quietly, repeatedly, without applause. Number 10, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1965. This is the spy film that refuses to give you comfort. The spy who came in from the cold feels drained on purpose. The world it shows is gray, tired, and emotionally worn down. The central figure isn't chasing victory. He's navigating exhaustion. Every decision feels heavy because every option carries loss. What makes this film stand out is its honesty. Espionage here isn't heroic. It's transactional. People are moved, sacrificed, and discarded without ceremony. Ideals are tools, not beliefs. Released during the height of Cold War tension, the movie predicted a future where moral clarity would fade, where justification replaces truth, where winning becomes less important than maintaining appearances. Today, those themes feel sharp. Institutions still ask for trust while offering little transparency. Decisions are framed as unavoidable. Responsibility dissolves into systems. The film's power comes from what it refuses to explain. You're not guided toward a conclusion. You're left to sit with discomfort. And that discomfort is the point. This isn't a story about sides. It's about what happens when systems value outcomes more than people. Number 9, Commandos Strike at Dawn, 1942. This is a resistance story that feels personal before it feels dramatic. Commandos Strike at Dawn opens in a quiet village under occupation. Life continues, but tension hangs in the air. Rules are strict, trust is fragile, Everyone is watching everyone else. The film takes its time showing how control works not through constant force, but through fear and routine. Paul Mooney delivers a deeply grounded performance as an ordinary man pushed toward extraordinary decisions. His transformation doesn't happen overnight. You see doubt, grief, anger, and eventually resolve. It feels earned because the film lets you live inside that slow emotional shift. What makes this movie stand out is its focus on everyday consequences. Families are affected. Neighbors turn distant. Small acts carry huge risk. When the story finally builds toward a coordinated strike, it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels necessary. Visually, the film uses shadows and tight framing to reinforce a sense of constant surveillance. Even quiet moments feel exposed. That tension never fully relaxes, even when the characters share brief moments of warmth. Released early in the Second World War, the film carries an urgency that later productions sometimes lack. It wasn't reflecting on history, it was responding to it in real time. Commando's Strike at Dawn works because it understands that resistance isn't about glory. It's about refusing to disappear quietly, and that message still hits hard. Number 8, Go for Broke, 1951. This film carries pride, frustration, and quiet strength in every scene. Go for Broke tells the story of the Japanese-American soldiers of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, men who fought bravely for a country that questioned their loyalty. That tension sits at the heart of the film and gives it emotional depth that few war movies even attempt. What makes this film special is its authenticity. Many of the performers were actual veterans from the unit itself. You can feel it in the way they move, talk, and interact. Nothing feels staged. Camaraderie comes naturally. Humor feels earned. The story follows their training and combat experiences, but the emotional focus stays on identity and respect. These soldiers aren't just proving themselves to commanders, they're proving something to history. The film doesn't shy away from showing prejudice and misunderstanding, but it handles those moments with restraint rather than anger. Van Johnson's commanding officer begins with assumptions and distance, and watching that perspective change becomes one of the film's most satisfying arcs. Trust is built slowly, through action rather than words. Go for Broke isn't loud or flashy. It's steady, sincere, and deeply human. By the time it ends, you understand why this unit became legendary, and you're left wondering why stories like this aren't talked about more often. Number 7, A Walk in the Sun, 1945. This film understands that waiting can be more exhausting than fighting. A Walk in the Sun follows an American platoon moving slowly through the Italian countryside with one simple objective: reach a farmhouse. What happens along the way is not explosive or dramatic in the usual sense. Instead, the film focuses on what fills the space between moments of danger: doubt, fatigue, small talk, silence. What makes this movie so effective is its patience. Scenes stretch out, conversations wander, soldiers talk about home, food, and things that have nothing to do with the mission. And that's the point. This is how people cope when tension never fully goes away. The film captures that mental pressure better than most war movies ever made. Leadership shifts unexpectedly, forcing characters to step into responsibility before they feel ready. There is no grand moment of confidence, just decisions made because someone has to make them. That realism gives the story weight. Visually, the film avoids flashy composition. The countryside feels open but unsafe. Danger could come from anywhere, which makes every step forward feel uncertain. When conflict finally arrives, it feels earned because you've traveled the entire distance with these men. A Walk in the Sun doesn't rush to impress you. It asks you to walk alongside its characters and feel the slow burn of uncertainty. By the end, you realize how rare that approach really is, and how powerful. Number 6, Fixed Bayonets, 1951. This is pressure turned into a story. Fixed Bayonets drops you into a brutal winter retreat during the Korean War, where survival depends on holding a position long enough for others to escape. Supplies are low, temperatures are unforgiving, and the enemy never feels far away. At the center is a young corporal forced into leadership when those above him fall. He doesn't want command, he doesn't feel ready, and that uncertainty becomes the emotional core of the film. You watch him wrestle with responsibility, hesitation, and the fear of making choices that could cost lives. Director Samuel Fuller brings a raw edge that feels lived in. Snow-covered terrain becomes a character itself, emphasizing isolation and vulnerability. Scenes are tight and claustrophobic, even outdoors, creating a constant sense of being boxed in. What elevates Fixed Bayonets is its honesty. There's no false confidence. Moments of humor feel desperate rather than light. Bonds form quickly because they have to. The film understands that leadership isn't about speeches. It's about making decisions while afraid. Every supporting character feels real, even with limited screen time. Their reactions feel instinctive, not scripted. That grounding makes the tension hit harder. Fixed Bayonets doesn't romanticize hardship. It respects it. And by doing so, it becomes one of the most emotionally effective war films of its era, even if it never sought attention. Number 5, The Way Ahead, 1944. This film begins almost gently, then tightens its grip without warning. The Way Ahead starts with a group of ordinary civilians drafted into military life. They come from different backgrounds, carry different attitudes, and initially struggle with structure and discipline. Early scenes have warmth and even humor, making the characters feel approachable. Training is awkward. Mistakes are common. Authority is questioned. But slowly, through routine and pressure, something changes. Bonds form. Responsibility sets in. The men begin to move as a unit rather than individuals. When the story shifts from training grounds to active duty in North Africa, the tone changes completely. The humor fades, the stakes rise, and the transformation becomes clear. These are no longer confused recruits. They are soldiers facing real consequences. The film succeeds because it earns that transition. You've watched these men grow step by step. So when danger arrives, it feels personal. Losses carry weight. Victories feel fragile. The direction avoids exaggerated heroics. Combat is presented as chaotic and uncertain. Courage appears in quiet moments rather than loud gestures. The Way Ahead works because it respects process. It shows how people are shaped by pressure rather than magically transformed. And by the end, you realize you've watched something rare. A war story built patiently, honestly, and with genuine care for its characters. Number 4, Hell in the Pacific, 1968. 2 enemies, 1 island, and no room for comfort. Hell in the Pacific strips war down to its most basic elements: survival, pride, and distrust. A stranded American pilot and a stranded Japanese officer find themselves trapped together on a remote island, forced into constant conflict without understanding each other's language. At first, hostility rules everything. Supplies are sabotaged, shelter is contested. Every interaction feels like a challenge. But as time passes, survival demands cooperation. And that shift creates one of the most fascinating dynamics in war cinema. With almost no dialogue, the film relies on physical performance and visual storytelling. Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune communicate through gesture, posture, and silence. Every glance carries meaning. Every action becomes a negotiation. Nature plays an enormous role here. The island is beautiful but unforgiving. The ocean isolates. The jungle conceals. The environment doesn't care who wins. The film refuses easy messages. Just when understanding seems possible, conflict returns. That tension reflects the larger tragedy of war itself. Moments of connection constantly under threat. Hell in the Pacific is bold, minimal, and unforgettable. It proves that war stories don't need armies to feel massive. Sometimes 2 people are enough. Number 3, Battleground, 1949. This film shows endurance as its own kind of courage. Battleground focuses on American soldiers holding their position during the Battle of the Bulge. Conditions are brutal. Cold bites through clothing. Supplies run thin. Sleep becomes a luxury. The enemy pressure never fully lifts. What sets this film apart is its attention to small details. Soldiers argue over minor comforts. Jokes are used to stay sane. Fear surfaces quietly, often unspoken. These moments make the experience feel grounded and real. Combat scenes are tense without being exaggerated. The film avoids glorifying chaos. Instead, it emphasizes persistence, staying put, holding ground, surviving another day. The cinematography uses snow and shadow to reinforce isolation. Foxholes feel cramped and exposed at the same time. Every decision feels heavy because there's no clear relief ahead. Battleground was ahead of its time in portraying the psychological toll of prolonged pressure. Characters aren't fearless. They're tired. And that exhaustion becomes the story. By the end, you understand that victory here isn't dramatic. It's quiet, it's stubborn, and it's earned inch by inch. Number 2, Sahara, 1943. This film turns heat, thirst, and time into enemies you can feel. Sahara places its story in the endless deserts of North Africa, where survival depends less on firepower and more on endurance. A small group of Allied soldiers finds themselves stranded with a damaged tank, low supplies, and no clear escape. Their mission isn't victory. It's staying alive long enough to matter. What makes Sahara so effective is how it uses environment as pressure. The sun feels relentless. Sand seems to stretch forever. Water becomes more valuable than strategy. Every decision is shaped by exhaustion and desperation. You can almost feel the dryness in your throat as the story unfolds. Humphrey Bogart delivers a controlled, grounded performance as a leader forced to balance calm authority with growing tension. His character doesn't dominate the group through volume or bravado. He leads by reading people, understanding limits, and knowing when to hold firm. The group itself is diverse, bringing different personalities and viewpoints together under extreme stress. Conversations reveal fears, humor, and doubt in equal measure. These moments humanize the situation and keep the story emotionally anchored. The film builds tension not through constant action, but through anticipation. Waiting becomes unbearable. Every delay feels dangerous. And when confrontation finally arrives, it feels inevitable rather than heroic. Sahara works because it understands that survival stories don't need constant movement. Sometimes the most gripping tension comes from standing still and hoping time runs out in your favor. Number 1. The Steel Helmet, 1951. This is the film that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't soften its edges. The Steel Helmet opens with survival by chance. A soldier lives because of a single piece of gear, then immediately returns to danger without reflection or relief. That blunt opening sets the tone for everything that follows. The story centers on a small group of soldiers taking shelter in a Buddhist temple during the Korean War. What should feel like a place of peace instead becomes a fragile stronghold, constantly threatened. The setting is symbolic without being sentimental. Safety here is temporary and uncertain. Director Samuel Fuller brings a confrontational style that feels raw even today. Dialogue is sharp. Characters clash openly. Prejudice, fear, and frustration surface without apology. These aren't idealized figures. They are people pushed past comfort, reacting imperfectly. What makes the film powerful is its refusal to simplify. Authority is questioned. Decisions feel risky. Morality is blurred by survival. The characters don't always agree, and the film doesn't rush to resolve those conflicts neatly. Visually, the film feels tight and uneasy. Framing emphasizes confinement and exposure at the same time. Every pause feels like a warning. Every quiet moment feels earned. The Steel Helmet doesn't try to inspire you gently, it confronts you directly, and that honesty is exactly why it remains so impactful. It proves that war stories don't need polish to be unforgettable. They need truth, even when it's uncomfortable. So what if the most powerful war films aren't the loudest or the most famous, but the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to press play? These stories prove that impact isn't about budget or hype. It's about tension, people, and moments that stay with you longer than expected. If one of these surprised you, say which one in the comments. Share this with someone who loves discovering overlooked classics, and subscribe for more deep dives into films that deserve another look. Sometimes the quietest stories leave the loudest echoes.